morning show. They put you in the know. So I hope that you ready. All we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info. You gon' be like, whoa. Here in the dark, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to a really crappy, shitty morning, but it's all good.
It's a fucking Friday, that's for sure. Yeah, so slight technical issues while we're still working with the deck chairs here, but thank you for everyone for your patience. Our tens of viewers who tune in live. Yeah, so good morning, everybody. Welcome to Friday. This is post debate. I believe this was the final debate between our presidential candidate, two of our presidential candidates. We actually have multiple people running for president who don't get time on the debate stage. I wish they would have. I watched about an hour and 20 minutes of the debate last night, and it would have been so much better and a broader conversation if we did have these other viewpoints in a, what's supposed to be a healthy democracy on the stage. But before we get to that, there's one thing that is going on behind the scenes that you may or may not be aware of. The Senate Judiciary Committee voted unanimously among Republicans, no surprise there, to move Amy Barrett's case forward for Supreme Court nomination. The Democrats abstained and, boycotted the vote, but that's about all they've done. And I want to thank, the name escapes me. I'm so sorry. Pamela Stitcher sent me information where Amy Goodman was doing an interview with Zephyr Teachout. And for those of you who don't recall, Zephyr was running for office. She's also an attorney. And it was a very good interview on what Democrats could be doing to stop this nomination process and what they call packing the court from moving forward. So I want to post a link here, and I will do that in just a second so that you can go out and see the interview for yourself. But Zephyr makes this point that I want to push back on Zephyr's point, because she was alarmed, and she calls it, a time bomb, by having Amy Barrett join the Supreme Court and have a 6-3 heavily conservative group leaning against women's rights, reproductive rights. And I want to push back on that just a little bit, because it's not just a 6-3 if Amy Barrett gets confirmed, but we are also moving full steam ahead in electing a president who agrees with Amy Barrett. And I want to make that point very clear. So for the blue MAGA Biden folks, Biden shares the same view as Amy Barrett on reproductive rights. He tried to strip those provisions out of the ACA when he was vice president to make sure that certain protections for female reproductive rights were not in there. So I want you to be conscious of exactly what we're about to do. If Amy Barrett gets confirmed and Joe Biden becomes president, where's the resistance? And I would go back to the Amy Goodman interview with Zephyr Teachout to say that there is no resistance in Congress with our Democratic leadership. None. It's just us out here in the streets. And so this is why I think it's very timely. So thank you to Pamela for providing that link. It's just, you got to understand the forest for the trees for where we are now. So it's not just voting rights and everything else that goes forward with the Supreme Court nomination. It's reproductive rights, right? So how many millions of women went to DC with their pink pussy hats? Joe Biden, look, I'm Catholic too, but the difference between Joe Biden and I is I recognize that my faith, my choice, it reflects on me. And I am obedient to that law. I am not trying to make others who are not part of that faith obedient to my rules. Whereas Joe Biden is old school Catholic, and he has no problem doing that. So Yeah, good luck there.
Yeah,
So
well, plus it's rather telling that, gee, doesn't my screen look great like that?
you look like you're in a sauna this morning.
Actually, it looks more like a snowstorm. Um,
Yeah, well, technical issues this morning. It's Friday, so whatever. We can still hear you.
oh, great.
So you could be making faces and we wouldn't know. I wouldn't. I no, I can kind of decipher it.
Oh my God. I
Poor
just
Andy.
shoot me now. You,
Usually it's me struggling with all the tech an hour or two before we go live. So I feel for you, Andy. I
well, no,
understand.
it's just a lack of testing, right? Like I had a laptop set up, everything looked amazing, it was all great, um, and then we click on go stream, and it's some video card error that pops up. It's like, are you freaking kidding me? I spent all morning getting this set up. Your
Right.
video card needs to be updated. My laptop is newer than my PC. Are you kidding? Stop it! Stop being
Yeah,
such an
and
ass.
we didn't get the error until we tried to stream, 20 minutes before. So it had to scramble. But yeah, so hey, good morning, Mike. Thanks for joining us this morning. And everyone else, if you're just tuning in, this is a live show, so anything can happen. But we want you to join in the conversation. And if I suffered through the debate last night, oh, hey, Andy, you're back. If I suffered through the debate last night and you did too, weigh in on your thoughts, right? So I saw Jimmy Fallon out on Twitter going, debate in 6 words, give us your funniest take and we'll put it on air. So I didn't watch the Jimmy Fallon show, but I went through some of the tweets, and I think all the comedians had long since gone to bed. There were a couple there that were pretty decent, but mostly people were like, let's get on with it. And the one thing that was missing from the debate was we were supposed to have the failsafe of a mute button for the moderator, and during the time that I saw, there was no mute. In fact, she was talked over quite a bit, and every time she tried to say let's move on, both Trump and Biden kind of took over the conversation. So their rebuttals really didn't have any merit. You could have had 2 complete strangers playing the role of Trump and Biden who would have said the same thing, like, that's not true. That's flatly not true.
Well, they do what most old people do. Oh, that's better. Jeez. They do what most old people do, is they just turn down their hearing aids, right? So you can't be interrupted if you can't hear somebody.
My father-in-law does that. That is so true, Andy. That is so true. Yeah. So this is basically the whole image that I got was 2 old white men with money arguing about being made of cheese. That was it. There was nothing new in it. And in fact, the whole almost the entire first hour was about foreign policy, which we already know. We've seen Trump's foreign policy. We know Biden's foreign policy. You either have catering to dictators to placate them, or you have Biden who actually said we are going to ramp up and force them and show them, like North Korea. I didn't really get a good sense on what that was going to look like. So it was just
It's just leaving the possibility of the military-industrial complex to be at the ready to start spending money, because there's a lot of rich ammunition producers and military hardware producers that have lost a lot of money, because there hasn't been enough war going on.
Oh, they've lost no money, none whatsoever. But let's back up a little bit. So we know that they're both, very big into war, because that's how you get reelected, and strong presidency. So they started with COVID, which Okay, so you had Trump's complete and utter failure and then his denial of that failure, and he's taking responsibility. But then what I didn't hear from Biden was what exactly he would do. He talked about providing states with money to get their PPE. Neither one talked about getting money and support to American families, right? So the CARES Act was minimal. When you compare what the US did compared to the rest of the global community and how they took care of their own people, the U.S. was, pretty much last next to India. But neither one of them talked about benefits for working people. So you had the Paycheck Protection Act, so you can keep people on staff, but that does not keep a small restaurant able to pay their rent to hold the space so that they can go back to business, right? So what happens is if you're a restaurateur, you force yourself to open and you put people at risk. And so we saw all of this cascade to now we're in spike 2, spike 3. And then one thing that Trump kept saying was he kept pointing out Democratic states like North Carolina and New York and California who are doing poorly. Well, Andy, you and I talked about it Monday. It's like 45 states, Republican and Democratic led, that are all spiking. So he was woefully off there, the entire nation in our country, which is why Canada closed the borders. This is why I, as an American with my passport, cannot travel to Europe and to other parts of the world, because every state is having this problem. It's not a red-blue team problem, though on that stage you'd hardly notice, right? They were completely Democrat, Republican, whatever. In the end, it's just us. It's just us out here resisting. It's just us trying to survive. It's just us dying. And
I would really like to know where that Trump pulled the number out of his ass for 700,000 would have died, if it hadn't been for his heroic efforts.
He made that up. He absolutely made that up. And I'm not sure what heroic efforts he's talking about, because we're still kind of waiting for those federal efforts. Like the HEROES Act, we talked about that on Monday. Pelosi had this arbitrary 48-hour deadline, more of the performative stuff, but that deadline came and went. Mnuchin and Pelosi in the White House, they had a little, I guess it was a 1 hour, 20-minute phone call, and that's the result. That's it. Nothing for us, right? So
they talked about ice cream.
She didn't even share her ice cream. So we still are having this problem, and you can see it. All you need to do is safely and social distance walk out to your local strip mall, walk out to restaurants and see what's going on. They're really struggling. So those Main Street and your home is where the money should be going, because remember, Wall Street got their money. And right now we're still pushing for a moratorium on rents and evictions. And yet the people who own the building, if you have like a 4-unit apartment building, most cities have these, that landlord did not get the support they needed, but the company that wrote the mortgage for the building did. So it didn't, there's no trickle down when it comes to the COVID and all the money and benefits. And nowhere was that discussed in the debate last night. Nowhere. American people weren't involved in that conversation at all, except to be used as props for those of us who are sick and dying. That was it. So that was my take on the COVID section. And then, of course, we had the election interference. The moderator brought up that Russia and Iran are believed to be trying to interfere with propaganda and all of this. And in my head, and actually in my notes, I wrote, Bolivia, what? So I was like, wait a second, they're buying ads on Facebook for propaganda. We just helped stage a coup in another country. I think that qualifies as election interfering, but I'm not sure. Maybe. So that was my take on that entire section. So and then Trump. Okay, so here's where I really got to be cautious. because I want to talk about this, but I don't want to get shadow banned on YouTube and Facebook for talking about. There was this thing that happened, and allegedly a business partner of a family member of one of the candidates talked about a business meeting that he had had where one of the candidates was present, allegedly, and there was some money that was tossed back and forth, or some contact. I think y'all know where I'm going, but I'm not going to say it. And so Trump himself was trying to play that up. It just looked like something out of 2016 with, you know, Hillary and her emails and the Russia thing and the Democratic side. So it was like deja vu all over again, to quote Yogi Berra. You had the Russia, and then his emails. And that's where the first half of everything took off. And I was like, I've seen this before.
I don't know where.
Yeah. So, and at the same time, it also came up about Trump paying more taxes in China than he pays in the US. And this I thought was really creative. Trump decided to say that he prepaid his taxes. That's why he only owed $750. Maybe that's true. We haven't seen his tax returns that he keeps promising, and he made more promises last night to release his tax returns after the audit. I'm like, and we've already seen that has been disproven. He can release his tax returns whether he's under audit or not. So
that's a
yeah.
5-year audit. That's a long audit.
Well, he said himself that the IRS hates him. So yeah. So there was, the whole thing was kind of a rehash of the last election, last debates. I'll release my tax returns when, you know, I get permission. He doesn't need this. So this was interesting. The emoluments clause issue came up, but they never named it, which I thought was interesting, because you and I, Andy, covered New York's Southern District and the 3 cases that are still ongoing about emoluments violations. So for those of you who are not familiar, you are not permitted, it is illegal, a felony for you to use your public office for personal gain. And I remember early on in the Trump administration, when you had Ivanka using press junkets like Home Shopping Network with her bracelets and all of these things that they were, do you like Ivanka's look? You can buy it now for $1,200. And they literally did this. So they started to back off that, but the deals are still going forward. So we saw recently where Trump himself has paid more money into China for their taxes and benefits. And so that did come up a little bit, not as much as I would have liked, but Trump himself, he said, I have many bank accounts and they were closed in 2015. And my notes obviously went to Ivanka and her clothing deals and whatever. So what I kept seeing back and forth was Trump talked about Beau, and Biden talked about the Trump kids and the relationships, the improper relationships in office. And I was like, they're 2 sides of the same coin here. And I know that Blue MAGA is going to lose their mind by my saying that. But think about it. If you go to work one day and sitting in a team meeting is your boss's kid, and they introduce them as their kid, and that kid refers to your boss as mom or dad in meetings, is that cool with you? Do you think everything is totally kosher with this new dynamic and the familiar relationships in this hierarchy? Now imagine that in a leadership role of a nation. And this is what we're talking about, right? So we know that Nancy Pelosi's kids have benefited from her role. We know that Beau Biden has obviously benefited from his father's role. Trump, we can see his kids on full parade any day of the given week. So to me, it was like, okay, this is kind of, there's a same here. So I really saw no difference there. I don't know, Annie, am I wrong? I
Well,
don't
the,
expect
the, the
Canada.
perfect example of what's happening with Hunter Biden, right? With this whole there's nothing there, right? Like this stuff has come out, and it's probably a non-starter to begin with, right? We know everybody in politics currently is corrupt, right? So it's just another story. But why isn't mainstream media covering this? Like why are we not why are we relying on social media to get any information on this, and it's all been hidden, and of course all of the pundits involved are all screaming Russia, Russia, Russia. You know,
Mhm.
if you are interested to find out what's going on with that and wondering why you don't, all you need to do is replace the name Hunter Biden with Eric Trump, right? And
Excellent
then
point.
see the feeding frenzy that will happen. There'll be so much coverage on that, people will forget there's an election in a week and a half, right? It's just that's just the narrative, right? It's the it's the Democrats and their lapdogs in the media that are quashing a story before the election. That's all it is. It's plain and simple, right? You've got this this entire branch of the Democratic Party that just controls the narrative. It's disgusting.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. I totally agree. So, and you see that this morning with, just people like Neera Tanden from CAP and Stacey Abrams really trying to quash some serious allegations that are coming out, right? With just, oh, it's propaganda. Well, if it is, let's look at it. Let's talk about it. If there's, we certainly don't want to elect someone who is center right, Joe Biden, and have the same level of division and upheaval because of allegations of wrongdoing. We don't want that to happen. And by trying to stifle those conversations and really pull it apart, that's what we're setting ourselves up for. And this is why, as progressives, we are constantly screaming a warning about if you elect a center right person who further divides the country, we're going to get somebody far worse than Trump. We'll get like a President Tom Cotton who's full on fascist, right? That's what we're trying to avoid. But you keep telling us to shut up and sit down, or if you're Biden, to vote for Trump.
And it's exact same cycle over and over, right? The Republicans in there, it's a it's absolute threat to the American way of life. We've got to get him out there. Here's our shitty candidate. Vote for him. So they vote for him. Nothing fundamentally changes. So in 4 years, they change it up, right? We go back to voting Republican because the Democrats didn't do anything for us, right? And then the next election cycle, you've got, oh, it's another horrible threat. We got to get rid of them. And it just goes back and forth and back and forth. And what does that tell us? It's the same party. They're more than happy to just trade places back and forth, keep the status quo, make no fundamental changes, and just bank on the fact that people's memories are too short to remember what they did 4 years ago or 8 years ago, and they just keep going back and forth, and it never changes, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I think it's absolutely hilarious that you get people that come on sites like ours that support Donald Trump and think they're trolling us by posting memes about Biden. You know, that's the narrative in mainstream media, that Joe is a progressive and a socialist, and if you want to get back at progressives, you strike out at Joe Biden, when Trump supporters and progressives have that in common, right?
Well, to your point, Trump actually used the S word last night and called Biden a socialist. So that literally happened. And here's what was ironic about it, right? They had started to talk about how are you going to help the American people? So this was well over an hour into the debate. You had kind of this footnote conversation about, 330 million people And Trump was the one who called Biden a socialist when
Hello?
Trump himself had tested positive for COVID, used socialized healthcare in
Hello?
Walter Reed, the best
You're
team
home?
available in this
I'm
country,
doing my show,
consulting
honey.
with
I'll be
global
there in a second.
experts, a
Give me
private
10
room.
minutes.
His family got the same level of care, and it was all on our dime, not his. But that's not socialism, right? So they finally started to talk about Americans and healthcare, and this is where the entire debate for me took a complete nosedive, and I literally felt nauseous at this conversation. So they turned to healthcare and access to healthcare. And Trump was saying that he wants to keep the protections for pre-existing conditions, but he wants to do away with the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. And he and the Republicans will have a great plan, a great plan. We waited now 9 years for any outline of a plan, and they have produced none, some similar to his tax returns. So there has been no plan, but there is always talk of a plan. If you recall, the Affordable Care Act is based off of the Heritage Foundation plan, written in 1995 through 98 and published in 98 on the Right Wing Heritage Foundation website. They've since removed it. We have screenshots. We know it exists. So Republicans want to go even further, and I think their plan is going to be just die quietly. And if you can't afford it, then you don't deserve to live. But Trump himself said it's still coming, it's still coming. Well, pay attention to what they do, not what they say. They have done nothing, right? So then on the flip side, and this is where I started screaming, Biden finally articulated his public option. He said, I want to expand the ACA, and I want to include a public option based on Medicaid, not Medicare, Medicaid. Here's the problem. With Medicaid, you have the expansion of Medicaid under ACA, which was fine, but it is the base level care provided to the poorest of the poor, right? So we in this country in the last decade have cut reimbursement rates for doctors and hospitals for Medicaid. So this means rather than you seeing someone with private insurance who will pay you $400, you can take a patient with Medicaid and will pay you $30. If you're a doctor who is also a business person and trying to pay your own employees and stay in business, you're going to elect not to take Medicaid patients and you're going to take the private insurer. And that is what has been happening in this country for the last decade, to the point where we have large portions of our entire country where you cannot get a Medicaid doctor or hospital, except in the case of an emergency. In an emergency like a car accident, then all bets are off. You have to be treated. But for chronic conditions and things like this, And I just moved from a county that had 0 doctors and hospitals that took Medicaid. That meant that the entire population of 800,000 people was not covered if they had Medicaid. And my county was not unique. It happens everywhere. So the other thing that you need to remember about Medicaid is most states in this country have a requirement that if you are on Medicaid and you pass away, then your entire bill of all the costs that you have incurred for the state under Medicaid must come out of your estate when you pass away. So this means if I'm on Medicaid and I'm being treated, I can actually find a doctor, or I'm willing to travel 2 or 3 hours for a single appointment, then every dollar that I have spent for my care on Medicaid goes back to my family when I die. This means they take my assets, my house, anything that I own, car, parts of life insurance, all of these things. So one of the people that I was conversing with, Dragon Tattoo, online. She actually talked about her mom. When her mom was on, I believe it was her mother, when her mother was on Medicaid, she said, oh, I'm sorry, my grandmother. When my grandmother died, the state called and asked how much she had in the bank and how much in other assets she had. So they reported back to the state $627 with no additional assets. And so the state then turned around and sent a bill for the exact amount to the family. If her grandmother had owned a house, they would have taken that too. So I want you to understand what Joe Biden is proposing. He's proposing that the poorest of the poor, the people who want a public option, will get craptacular insurance and not necessarily access to health care. So this is Blue MAGA telling other people, you don't matter as my neighbor, as my fellow countrymen, so long as I am comfortable and I'm allowed to go back to sleep, so that I am okay with Biden in the White House and I can just push you off on a plan that is ineffective and actually detrimental and costs more than if they would just give in to Medicare for all. And I don't understand why they're so reticent, because insurance companies are taking a nosedive. So they're not going to be the bastions of donor dollars that they once were. And yet we're still being held hostage as a country by these insurance companies. So Andy, I don't know if I'm able to share the map that I pulled up. Give me screen share privileges. Nope.
Hang on. Let me do that right now.
Okay. So I went out and did some research, and I tried to find a really clear visual so that people could understand where ACA stands right now. And I have written many articles about this, about the cost savings of the Affordable Care Act come from the same reduction of dollars paid to doctors and hospitals. It is not that we're covering more efficiently, it's that we're paying doctors less under ACA.
You should be
And
able
so
to share
what is
now, Carrie.
Okay, and so what has actually happened is that there are fewer providers willing to take an ACA plan. And there are fewer insurers now who are willing to write a policy. So this is where we are at now. Let me see if I can pull this up. All right. So here is the map that I found, and I was hoping that this would provide a really good visual for people to understand what we're talking about and what bill of goods were being sold. So if you look at this map, in the red areas, there are no insurance companies who will write an ACA plan, zero. And this is not Medicaid, this is private insurance, right? So if you are not getting insurance through an employer, you get laid off and you don't want to pay for COBRA. If you are a small business owner, any of these people who is not getting insurance through an employer or your employer doesn't offer it, you can go for an ACA plan and use your future tax payments to offset the premiums. In these red areas, you could not buy insurance on ACA with cash in hand. It is not available. In the yellow areas, there is just one carrier. So that's your Aetna, that's your Blue Cross, that's any one of those companies, only one covers it. And you can look at their entire states where there's only one. Well, we call that a monopoly, right? That's not free market, that's a monopoly. So you can tell right away that under those plans, to cover those areas, that insurance company is going to price gouge Americans like crazy. And that is exactly what's happening. And then even in the light green and the darker green areas, you still only have 2 or 3 carriers. And I guarantee you, and you can take this to the bank, they're talking to each other about how to price their plans. Absolutely. Because when you have a pool of 100 doctors and each one of those insurance companies is trying to say, hey, come join our network so that we can, offer this and we'll bring you patients and all of these things. All of that is known and understood between all of these companies. So there is no real competition, not like you would have if you're trying to buy a car and there are 10 dealerships who want your business. This is where we are at today with ACA. And Joe Biden is talking about saving this, when in fact we should be having a real conversation about saving money overall and stopping with the duality of healthcare right now, because every one of those politicians, from Trump to Biden and everyone in Congress, in your state house, your local representatives, is getting insurance benefits paid for by you while they are telling you no. And that's not right. That's socialism for them, but not for you. When in fact, when we went to a system, if we were to go to some system like Medicare for All, where we all have the same coverage, we all have the same benefits, do you think a Nancy Pelosi and a Mitch McConnell would even dare mess with it? Do you think that they would cut benefits for veterans while keeping it for themselves? They couldn't, because we're on the same plan. Either we're all in this together or we're not. And today we are not. And that is the bottom line. So when I was listening to Joe Biden, and in the back of my head, I kept thinking of, friends of our program and my personal friends who are all in for Joe Biden. And I was like, okay, just wait. Finally, I couldn't do it anymore, because the reality is, we are more than happy to sell out people and tell them their lives don't matter so that I can be comfortable. And that's not okay. I'm not okay with that. And before somebody comes at me, I'm on Medicare as a disabled American. I also have fundamental understanding of insurance, ACA, and all of this. You can check out my background. So don't come at me with some bullshit. I know what I'm talking about. And so do most people who are struggling right now, especially those who are being treated for COVID at the same time they're being treated for chronic conditions. There is no room for the bullshit, lies, and propaganda anymore. We can see through it. And this is part of what was so upsetting. So, all right. Am I wrong? I mean,
No, but there was no frickin' way I was going to interrupt you.
Yeah, I know. I'm just to me it's surreal. It is absolutely surreal, because all the evidence is out there and we're still trying to have this conversation about saving ACA. Are you insane?
Well,
this is what it feels like.
Yeah, my perspective, exactly is this, because as a Canadian, my health care is paid for, right? And I don't have to worry about it. If I get sick or I get hurt, all I have to do is worry about getting better. I don't have to worry about going bankrupt. It's insane. And I look across the border and it blows my mind how people can actually advocate for that, right? Like, we know that the politicians are corrupt. We know that they're in the pockets of big business, big pharma, the health insurance industry, all of those big players, right? So their hands are tied. Corporatists, centrist neoliberals, they have no choice, right? Their campaigns are not funded by people; they're funded by corporations. So they have to do what they say, or their funds get cut off, and they can't win, right? But sitting here looking at that, and knowing what I know about healthcare and how, especially during a fucking pandemic, right? And
Right.
you can, politicians, sure, but regular Americans, right?
Right. And when you push back on this, then the answer is always, oh, you want Trump. And no, I don't want my neighbors to die. I don't want the cost of being poor to be higher than it is to live. And if you don't understand that, then there's something wrong with you. I can't teach you to care about people. Right. And that is where we are. People are so worried about themselves. And let's just call it out. Middle class white Americans are so worried about their position and their tenuous hold on where they are that they are willing to pretend that this is a valid argument. So I'm not the only one who's ranting this morning. We have a rant by Mike, and I want to read it. It's a little long, so bear with me on it. But he says, picture this. There are representatives from 7 parties in the House, 5 in the Senate, and no one party has majority control. Parties have to work together on topics that are key to their base because no one party can block or push legislation unilaterally. Parties form around key legislation, and when that goal is achieved, the party retires. You vote on a party based on that key legislation. You don't need to sacrifice other stances just to get progress on one stance. There is a plurality of parties on your ballot. And when you vote, you can rank them in order from most aligned with you to, if all else fails, this person is fine for me now. This can happen and we can do it. So what Mike is actually talking about is ranked choice voting and getting rid of our unilateral duopoly faux party system, right? And I think at this point in the electoral process in this country, seeing what happens during the primaries, seeing where we are now, if you still think that there are two separate parties, you have not been paying attention. That's all there is to it.
Sure, sure. I had a brief exchange with someone on Facebook yesterday, that came out with the typical vote shaming line. If you're not voting for Biden, you're voting third party. Your protest vote is actually a vote for Trump, and you're endangering all our lives because we have to defeat Trump at all costs, right? And my comeback to that was, listen, you're under the impression that everybody thinks that Joe Biden is the lesser of two evils, and that's a mistake, right? It's everybody's personal choice. It's what they understand as the real dangers in society, right? And as progressives, right, we understand that the neoliberal regime has to end, and that's not Trump. That's Joe Biden, right?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And it was very telling that this lady's comeback to that was, so you're telling me that a person that separates little children at the border is better than Joe Biden. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that that's something that isn't bad, right? Of course, that's awful. It's horrible. It should not happen. It happened during Obama, but we won't get into that part of it. But listen, if your only argument to me is about children being separated at the borders as your justification for not voting for Trump and voting for Joe Biden, then the fact that Americans don't have free health care isn't an issue for you. The fact that student debt hasn't driven people to bankruptcy and to the ability to not support themselves isn't an issue with you. So if that's the case, all of these progressive policies that we're talking about, then you're talking from a place of privilege, right? You're fine. I don't give a shit about the rest of society as long as I'm good, right?
And that's the core argument. And here's how you can see it, right? This is very telling. And there was a meme about this. And I had this conversation with one of my family members yesterday. So the meme goes like this. There's a cute little white girl. I think she's blonde in this cartoon. And she says, we can agree to disagree about certain things. And she's sitting with another woman, a woman of color, who says, yeah, bitch, we can disagree about pizza toppings. But whether Black Lives Matter and people should have access to healthcare is not something we should. So this is the conversation I was having yesterday with a family member, and you could tell the level of discomfort because they know at a deeper level that what they're doing is wrong. However, the conversation was like, well, yeah, I haven't really talked to you, or I rush you off the phone because inadvertently we end up talking politics and we just disagree. And my thought was, well, first off, you're uncomfortable with your position. That's why you don't want to discuss it and you can't justify it. And two, what in your life, in your day-to-day activities is not political?
Name one right thing. Now,
Well, yeah. So like you drive to work, gas prices, that's political. Your route to work and whether the road is being repaired, that's political. If you have a safe way to travel, That's political. The traffic and the flow, that's political. When you get to work, do you have rights as a worker? That's political. What kind of job and what wage are you being paid? That's political. Do you get breaks? Do you get lunch? Do you get benefits? All of those things. That's political. Everything in your day is political. When you say, I don't want to get political, what you are saying is, I am dug in on my position. I'm not willing to defend it, or I can't. I'm uncomfortable discussing it, and I don't want to argue about it because I can't. Right? So there is no argument that I could have with a family member if they know their position and they're willing to say, hey, I don't give a shit that Joe Biden's position put X number of million of people in jail. I don't give a shit that someone else might lose health care under Joe Biden, so long as I'm comfortable, because we got to get that guy out. And my point is this: I'm never going to vote shame somebody. But if we are so insistent on getting Trump out, where's the judicial system? Where are the lawmakers being held accountable? We have the emoluments clause. And if we are so set in a solid case on all of these things that we have accused Trump of doing, we even have the UN who has condemned us on 10 separate occasions because of our immigration policy. If that is not enough to remove him from office using our own constitution, our own laws, then an election isn't going to do it. What you're saying is all of those things are okay. And it's okay for him to do these things until it comes time to vote. Then we're going to trot it out as a performative issue. But we're really okay with these things because we're not going to hold him and everyone else accountable. You have Chad Wolf in DHS serving illegally. Who has gone to arrest him? No one. So don't give me this bullshit that we need to get Trump out of office. He could have been removed at any time. Chad Wolf could have been removed at any time. Bill Barr still hasn't been impeached. And how many times does he have to break the law? But yet it comes down to you and I and our vote, and we're supposed to fight over who's going to vote for the lesser evil. And this is the point.
Yes, absolutely. That's the absolute point, that it's all a fallacy. The whole idea that this is them versus us and we got to get, if they wanted to get rid of him, how many millions of different things has Trump done that they could instantly impeach him for and throw him on his ass, right? They don't want to, because it's one fucking party with a left wing and a right wing.
Yeah, and we talked about that. We talked about that with Shahid Buttar, who is running against Nancy Pelosi, who wrote this elegant piece years ago as a constitutional lawyer, talking about the tack that they should have taken under impeachment before impeachment became a thing. Instead, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats chose a narrow 2-minute phone call for their impeachment rather than the depth and breadth of everything that has gone on in the first year and a half alone. Why did they do that? Why just this 2 minutes that could have been pulled apart? Why not something solid like the emoluments clause that we saw play out in Washington, D.C. at the Trump Hotel? That we saw play out in Scotland when we were forcing our military to stop at a Trump golf course that was losing money? Why would we not do that? Well, because it was performative. And that's it, right? So it comes down to, yet again, the election of our lifetimes. Yet again, you'll have to wait on all of these other things. Your children, your family, your businesses, everyone else that you know in your community will have to wait, because we are yet again at the election of our lifetimes.
Oh, of course, right? As millions and millions of Americans have lost their jobs, lost any little bit of health care that they possibly had. The pandemic is raging, despite what right-wing pundits want you to believe about anti-masking and that it's been defeated. We've got all of these things happening, yet you have to vote for the Dems because Orange Man bad.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we have a new person watching this morning, Charlotte Martin. Charlotte Martin says BS, but she doesn't say BS to what. So expand on you've got mere minutes to tell us what you think is BS here, and we want to know. We want to hear, what do you disagree with, or are you agreeing with something and saying it is BS? So thank you for tuning in, Charlotte. Yeah, so those are my thoughts about the debate, the election, whatever. You know, I look at the Supreme Court decisions and the opinions on the Voting Rights Act. I look at polling places during the primary and in the general where you have to wait 6 hours, right? Do you recall at all in Iraq during the war how long Iraqis had to wait during a war to vote? I think the longest was 2.5, 3 hours. And they didn't have to show ID. They just got, the ink on their thumb to prove that they voted. We have to wait here 6 hours, 8 hours. But as far as I know, we're not at war. And we have to come up with IDs and all sorts of other things to prove that we are Americans and we can vote.
Well, you're not at war domestically because you can't hide that.
Did someone tell the militias?
Well, officially with another country, right?
Oh, officially. No. We're all we do Cold War stuff, trade and things like this. So, yeah. So that was my take on the debates. It was not a happy, fun time. So, but I didn't learn anything new. I don't think anyone learned anything new other than Biden's plan for public option is Medicaid. And I would challenge anyone, if you think that Biden's plan is a good one, opt out of your insurance, whatever you've got now, and sign up for Medicaid today. Do it. Good luck.
And let the good times roll.
Right. Exactly. So that's pretty much it for me. I know we started late, but just the rest of this just makes me kind of nauseous. So yeah. So anything, any final thoughts for you, Andy?
No, I'm good. I'm still angry from the laptop, so
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get that worked on. That'll
Yeah.
be fun.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you everyone for tuning in, for being patient with us as we still work through massive changes in our tech and bandwidth and everything that's going on. So thank you so much. And hopefully we'll be back on Monday morning bright and early with a recap of all the shit show that went on over the weekend and things to look forward to in the week ahead. So we are about 17 days to the election. I don't know, my birthday's coming up, so it's the day before the election, so I'll have to count that out. But yeah, that's it for me. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog.